As the Pentagon dismisses this second alleged leak, we know that the fallout will continue from Democrats and opposition to Donald Trump's administration. Make sure you're here on NewsX World for all of those developments. We now move over to Europe, and in the latest update, Russian President Vladimir Putin has responded to Ukraine's proposal to pause airstrikes on civilian infrastructure for 30 days. Putin says that Moscow would analyse the proposal before making any decisions. Ukraine's military confirmed that Russian drones attacked several regions overnight, including Dnipropetrovsk, Cherkasy and Mykolaiv. Meanwhile, Russia reported that Ukraine launched over 3,300 drone strikes and carried out 1,404 artillery shellings, targeting Russian military positions and key infrastructure. In another development, Russian President Vladimir Putin has officially signed a law ratifying a 20-year strategic partnership treaty with Iran. The deal, signed earlier this year with Iranian counterpart Masoud Pezeshkian, marks a significant step in the two nations' relationship. Earlier this year, US Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth remarked that NATO membership for Ukraine seemed unrealistic. He suggested Kyiv should abandon the goal of reclaiming all of its territory and instead focus on a peace settlement, potentially supported by international troops. In response to US discussions, the Kremlin expressed satisfaction over the Trump administration's stance on excluding Ukraine from NATO membership. Dmitry Peskov commented that Russia's position aligns with this development, expressing a sense of relief that Washington has reiterated its opposition to Ukraine's NATO membership. Meanwhile, China has welcomed all efforts towards achieving a ceasefire in Ukraine. Let's hear what Foreign Ministry spokesman has had to say.
注意到有关报道，中方乐见一切通往停火的努力，这是实现和平的必要一步。希望有关各方继续通过对话谈判解决危机。
Well, joining us to discuss these latest developments from the Russia-Ukraine conflict is John Rossimondo, President of the Viking Research Associates and a geopolitical analyst who's joining us from Washington, D.C. John, thank you very much, as always, for joining us today. I want to bring it back firstly to this 30-hour Easter ceasefire that we had, and strikes have resumed afterwards, but both sides have blamed the other of breaching this ceasefire, with talks continuing to take place around a potential 30-day ceasefire following this partial and 30-hour truce. How realistic would that be if both sides are blaming each other of breaking it when it's only such a short period?
Well, let's put it this way. The Russians never had any intention of honoring. It's just a lot of rhetoric, and the Kiev Post is saying this morning that it was never any sincerity in Putin's so-called Easter truce. So I think that the chances, based on what's going on, for getting a 30-day ceasefire are almost nil.
Yes, John, and I want to look now at some of the comments that we've had in. The Kremlin saying they will analyse this proposal from Ukraine. Is that potentially a positive move, or do you think there might be something else at play with Russia's response?
It's just all rhetoric. You know, the only thing that we get out of the Russians or the Ukrainians is rhetoric. So far, we've seen no real interest in bringing this conflict to a close, to the point that of Secretary of State Marco Rubio saying the United States is thinking of getting out of the talks. So that's the stark reality here. No one is interested in peace.
John, somebody who is still optimistic is President Donald Trump and his administration. They said that they would support an extension to that 30-hour Easter ceasefire, and they still, of course, remain hopeful. But we've heard in recent days that the US may walk away. Is this more posturing, or do you think there is a risk that these ceasefire negotiations could fall?
Well, I think it's a little of both. I mean, first, they're sending a shot across the bow of both the Russians and the Ukrainians that the United States is interested in leaving as a peace broker, then you also have the Trump administration saying it would recognize the capture of the territories in Ukraine by Russia. But I just don't see that reality is that the Russians are really interested in any kind of deal. They want to make the deal on the battlefield.
Yes, John, and looking at those military actions, we have seen reports and heard reports that, of course, Russian drones have attacked Ukraine in the early hours following that ceasefire. Air raid sirens being heard reportedly across as much as half of Ukraine. Russia also reporting thousands of strikes from Ukraine. Are we really as far away from peace as we were at the start of this point, where the US got seriously involved in negotiations?
Well, I think that the negotiations were naive from the get-go, because Putin has no intention of allowing Ukraine to be in the Western sphere of influence. It views Ukraine as an integral part of Russia, Russian identity, and it's not going to go anywhere.
Yes, John, and to bring an end to this discussion, optimism is waning, but what is needed, not just from the US, what is potentially needed from other key players in this? China speaking about their willingness to work towards peace. Europe, of course, continuously holding meetings. Is it required from all parties across the globe to really get this over the line, or does it lie in the hands of Russia and Ukraine solely?
It lies in the hands of one person, Vladimir Putin. And if Putin were to decide that he wanted a ceasefire tomorrow, the guns would be silent. But Putin has no interest in anything more than continuing his war of conquest. And the Ukrainians have no interest in putting their arms down, because they don't trust the Russians, and rightfully so.
John Rosamondo, thank you ever so much for joining us and providing us with your insights as the fighting continues between Russia and Ukraine and the diplomacy rolls on. We will be here to bring you all of those updates. But that is all that we have time for. We'll continue to bring you more of the latest breaking news from across the world.